All the nonsense is socially created, and these are based on narratives, and the narratives have their agenda to bring forth whatever it is that, whatever it's trying to push towards. That has nothing to do with reality. It has to do with the agenda. And people, because they live at the surface of life, believe in the narrative that they're being sold. The narrative is pushed endlessly upon them. Every single movie has the same narrative today versus 30 years ago. There was a different narrative. There's an evolution to the narrative, that means there's a thread, but today's narrative is very distinct in appearance from the one before. And that narrative is systematically being pushed, and you're consuming this, and this is where you get knowledge and data from. You don't have it from the inside. That's the social narrative. And the social narrative is engineered in order to make people into a certain way so that they behave a certain kind of way. And that they respond in a certain kind of way. So we can use the so-called anti-Semitic example. You use one word, everybody responds in the same way. That's not based on reality, that's based on a narrative and indoctrination and systematic punishment that makes you today respond in this way. So what I'm trying to say is that today there's a storyline that's being imposed on men and women, and in their dynamics, this is the law. But that has nothing to do with dharma and the sexual power, which obeys natural law. And natural law isn't one over the other. There's my power, there's your power. I have obligations and duties, and you have obligations and duties, and we come together to create something, and that creates a contract. The contract doesn't have to be written, but it's understood very clearly. You have your part. If you fail to do your part, you're replaced. If I fail to do my part, I'm replaced. And through that beneficial exchange, there's a flow which awakens love. What does that have to do with the social constructed narrative about what's right or wrong? Listen, dude, a couple of years ago, buying weed over there with the corner guy, it's illegal and you can go to jail. Today, in Canada, weed is legal, you buy it at a store. What does that say? Society imposes rules and invents. Once upon a time, I remember my mom was like anti-weed, right? So this is like the worst thing in the world. How'd she explain that 30 years later it's sold we have stores in Canada where they sell weed literally on the main avenues. This was the worst thing on earth. It was illegal, you go to jail, and now you go buy it at the store. What does that say? Whatever society says is right or wrong has its own agenda, and there's a political, socio-economical, political agenda behind, obviously. But these are the rules that people live by, and people, because they don't know how nature actually, what are the laws of nature, the real laws, not social laws, they buy into this and they live accordingly. But these laws don't match your system. My system operates and vibrates on natural law. And I'm not talking about law, natural law. This is, some people will understand. No, the ways, natural law, the laws of nature. So in the man and woman dynamic, so you can see from generation to generation, society imposes, this is how a man and woman interact. 1960s, this is how a man and woman interact. 1930s, this is how a man and woman interact. You can see, if you watch movies, right, or you see pictures, because the pictures don't go so far, right? But in movies, let's say they want to depict 1,000 years ago. Now, who knows how it really was unless you study history? They show you a narrative. Yeah, but the man and woman have always been the same. She has half of the power, I have the other half of the power. These sexual energies are supposed to come together in the name of nature in order to be able to serve something greater. It's always been the same. Yeah, but now this is the narrative society is teaching you. And if you change country, hell, you in Europe, you cross that border, boom, it's a different story. Then you create, boom, it's another story. Here it's legal, this is not legal. It's just like an imaginary line. Once I was in Egypt and I walked through Egypt by foot to Israel. The moment you set, there's a little line, there's a bunch of kiosks, it's called the borders, then you go on the other side, it's a whole other world. Like you can't get more another world than that. It's literally the same thing. The sand here, like I could kick it and it would go to the other side. It would be the same sand. No. So what does that say? These are socially constructed concepts that you adopt and that becomes the law. What I'm trying to tell you is that underneath there's a universal truth that doesn't change. So what's the nature of sexuality? It's what nature has described or decided that it is. It's not me who decides. And nature is not trying to cheat somebody or put somebody on top, meaning I'm more powerful or more important than you. But you're obviously, you have something. And she obviously has something. And both of you have a duty towards yourself as an individual, and towards one another in the name of something greater than both of you. And if you both fail, you'll be recycled. If you succeed and she doesn't, she's recycled. And if she succeeds and you fail, you're recycled. But that's nature. There's nothing wrong with that. And these are immutable laws. It's always the same. What does it have to do with this social constructed narrative that decides that today this is the story and this is the truth? That everybody adopts and then has emotions that are triggered by words, and what do these narratives do? Keep you at the surface of reality, keep you at the surface of your own power, and at the end of the day, all they create is more tension between the sexes. I think everybody can agree. Today, the tension between man and woman today is greater than it was 10 years ago, 20 years ago, 30 years ago, 40 years ago. I wasn't there before, so I don't know, but I can see, obviously. And it doesn't seem to be stopping. That means the tension is just growing and growing. Well, what has to do with how nature operates? Where that's a place where there's harmony. You have your power, you have your responsibility, she has hers, and you're supposed to come together. So I've already spoken about in videos before that if you wanted to rule over a people, what would you do? First thing, separate him and her from one another, impose a narrative and direct their sexual energy in order for them to create your empire. That's not hard to understand, but you have to have a sense of the grandeur of sexuality, what it can do. So in our modern day and age, I have to learn the ways of nature, because that's where my health and life and power actually resides. But there's a social contract that we're by default signed into. And if you want problems in your life, don't respect that and you'll have problems. Now, some people want to dedicate themselves to pushing that and want to change those. I don't care about that. That's not my business. But I have to respect those contracts. Otherwise, I'm going to have headaches. Yeah, but I am a disciple or a devotee of the way of life. Now, if you tell me I have to wear a red hat to avoid problems, sure. It's a detail for me. But in my interactions, at the surface, I respect the narrative, the way it is. I respect, you can't say that word. Well, I tend to avoid saying that word. You can't do this. Fine. But in my interactions, when I'm actually in relation to a person, we're going to go from the surface, go towards deeper inside. If we can meet at a deeper level, then we establish our relationship here. But at the surface, we live and present this. Because that's what's socially accepted. Otherwise, you're going to have a headache. I don't want to have a headache. It's like Kanye West. You know better than this. Don't talk about that. Talk about that, you're going to have a headache. I don't want a headache in my life because I don't give a fuck. I don't want a headache. You know what brings harmony? You need to know the way of life, harmonize yourself with it, and then the next layer is how do I create harmony now with the way society is being run and organized. And it'll find a beautiful place. It's not easy, I agree. And because society is becoming more constricted, but as you establish yourself in dharma or the way nature is designed, you also meet people like this, and then there's an understanding of the situation in the world. The world wants to see a facade. Yeah, but do I need to believe the facade? No, it's like today we go to the party, everybody's dressed in white. Do I always dress in white? No, but this is how we've agreed for the party, or this is what was imposed by the party. So with people in a real community where there's a place where we actually meet that's genuine, and there's something that really connects you, there's a real conversations about the nature of what's going on in the world and narratives, and how to navigate through this and avoid unnecessary problems. And if you can do, and what can we do to make the life of other people better at the surface? Is there something that we can do to help people? Wonderful. So we go and at the surface, we play the charade. Yeah, but it's always been a charade. It's a comedy. It was like, it's a comedy 50 years ago. Imagine you go back in time, 60 years. So it's 1960. Imagine how stupid people are. It's a charade also. You see, some people think it's more better. It's not more better at all. It's just another game. It's another comedy. You know those period movies? They're like in the let's say the 1800s, and they're all dressed and they're all like, look like idiots, right? It's a comedy. Look at today's comedy. The girl has purple hair. The guy's walking with pants underneath his ass. The guy is not a guy. Maybe, don't know, don't look, because maybe, it's a new comedy. Look at how they were dressed before. Like, look at the idiots. This is the Duke of, I don't give a fuck who you are from. Right? Like, imagine the nonsense. The surface is always a form of comedy. Wonderful. So, we can have a whole conversation about what governs the surface, but this is not what we're talking about. I'm subject, this is here. The laws of nature and how and what life is really about. That's a whole other rhythm. Then you come to the surface and adjust yourself accordingly as to avoid unnecessary stress. Yeah, fine. You want to fight, resist, that's your prerogative. I wish you the best. Genuinely, I sympathize with people who are righteous, but I don't fucking care. I don't want a headache. Changes nothing. You want peace and harmony? You have to tune yourself here. Now maybe your alignment means you need to say this or that. I don't know. But the point is, I've made my point.